Hey everyone, welcome back into the Birdland Network where we talk all things Orioles baseball and Major League Baseball. And today I'm back with a fun video as I give you my list of my all-time defensive team in Major League Baseball. What we're going to do, we're going to go around to each position and I'm going to give you who I think is the greatest defensive player at that position and why that is. But before we get started, if you are new here, please consider subscribing to the channel. Just hit that subscribe button and that bell notification. Doesn't cost anything to do that. That way every time we go live or do a new video, you'll be notified. And if you could, please give us a thumbs up on this video. It definitely helps to get us out there as we continue to grow. With that being said, let's get right into our list. So with the list, this is what I'm kind of looking for. Yes, I'm looking at Gold Gloves. Absolutely. I'm going to look at the amount of Gold Gloves they have. I'm going to look at their defensive WAR. I'm going to give it the eye test. Sometimes I'm going to look at players that I remember and how they played defensively and how that plays into my decision as well as we get into each position. Now look, I get it. Everybody is going to have their own opinion on this. That's what's so great about these is that they can be subjective. I am sure not everybody or anybody is going to agree with my list. That's okay. You don't have to. This is just one person's list of their opinions of the greatest defensive players at each position. And let's get right into it. Okay, so first off, we're going to start right at the center of the diamond. We're going to start with pitching. Now, I didn't do a left-handed pitcher and a right-handed pitcher. I'm just looking at pitching across the board as one person. So honorable mentions to Jim Palmer, one of my hometown heroes. Jim Palmer was fantastic as a defensive pitcher, fielding pitcher, and also Jim Cott. Jim Cott won tons of Gold Gloves. I think he won like 16 or something like that in his career as well, but he was a lefty. So if I was doing lefty-righty, I probably would have picked Jim Cott as a lefty, but I didn't do that. I just did pitchers across the board. So again, honorable mention to Jim Palmer, Jim Cott, and there's others out there as well. But my guy for pitching is number one, Greg Maddux. I just thought that Greg Maddux was the best fielding pitcher in the history of the game. He was just absolutely fantastic. He was phenomenal. Again, he was one of those guys. He could square his body. He was able to field his position incredibly well. 18 Gold Gloves. He was just phenomenal as a fielding pitcher. And to me, that's why he's number one. Okay, so we just did pitcher, so let's go to his battery mate, and let's go behind the plate to catchers. Now look, with catchers, there's a ton of great catchers out there defensively that you can choose from. Whether it be Johnny Bench, whether it be Riamalto, who's good today, or there's also Yogi Berra was fantastic behind the plate. Thurman Munson was pretty awesome behind the plate as well. There's a lot of different guys that you can look at. Benito Santiago was really good defensively. Salvador Perez isn't too bad back there as well. Jason Kendall was really good behind the plate. So there's a lot of different guys you can look at in the defensive side of things. But for me, I'm going to go with Ivan Rodriguez, Pudge. 13 Gold Gloves. He had a defensive WAR of 29.6, which is 8th all-time. He was just phenomenal behind the plate. He was one of the first guys to throw out runners from his knees behind the plate and instead of having to stand up. Just a phenomenal catcher. Great defensively. 13 Gold Gloves. And that's why, for me, the greatest catcher defensively is Pudge Rodriguez. Next, we're going to head on over to first base. Now, look, with first base, it's not just about picking throws out of the dirt. It's also about how you field your position on balls that are hit to you, whether it be line drives, ground balls, things of that nature. And there are a lot of different guys that have been really good defensively at first base. To take your pick. But the one guy for me that I feel like was the greatest defensive first baseman of all time was Keith Hernandez. I just, whether it was with the Cardinals, whether it was with the Mets, he was fantastic. He won 11 Gold Gloves and was just amazing over at first base. He saved so many throwing errors over his career, but not just that. He could really field his position. He had a great arm as well. And that's why, for me, greatest defensive first baseman of all time, Keith Hernandez. Heading on over to second base next, and there are many different guys that I think you could choose from. Bobby Grich comes to mind. There's also Bill Mazeroski comes to mind. A lot of folks really like Bid McPhee from back in the 1890s because back then they didn't even wear gloves. And he didn't wear a glove until like his last 3 seasons, and he was one of the last players to play barehanded. But for me, I'm going to go with Roberto Alomar. Roberto Alomar to me was the greatest defensive second baseman of all time. Well, probably one of the greatest second basemen, period. Not just defensively, but offensively as well. But specifically about the defense, what I really thought was amazing about Roberto Alomar was, first and foremost, he won 10 Gold Gloves. He was incredibly smart as a second baseman. His instincts were just incredibly good. He had an awesome range. He could get to almost anything. He had a great arm as well. Was just a smart player at second base. Again, he had the 10 Gold Gloves on top of it. And for me, I've got to go with Roberto Alomar as the greatest second baseman of all time. Now we're going to head on over to shortstop. And for me, I don't really think there's much of an argument for shortstop as to who the greatest defensive shortstop of all time is. And that's Ozzie Smith. Ozzie Smith had 13 Gold Gloves. He has the highest defensive WAR all time with a 44.2. Not highest defensive WAR at shortstop, highest defensive WAR out of all the positions at a 44.2. He is absolutely phenomenal as a shortstop. He had a good arm, he had incredible range, and made some of the most spectacular plays you've ever seen in your life at shortstop. He was just amazing. Wasn't much of a hitter. He had some moments with the hitting side of things, but we're talking about defense. And defensively, Ozzie Smith, there's really nobody that compares to what he did defensively. Omar Vizquel was really good, and there's been some other ones. Louis Aparicio is another one. Mark Belanger, who actually is second all-time in defensive WAR, was great as well. But I've got to go with Ozzie Smith. 13 Gold Gloves, greatest shortstop defensively. To me, it's Ozzie. Next, we're going to head on over to the hot corner. And just like I said, at shortstop, I'm going to say the same thing at third base. I don't even think this is a debate. I really don't. I'm not a homer, but on this one, I have to go with the home team. To me, the single greatest defensive third baseman of all time is Brooks Robinson. He is the mark for which any player that wants to be considered good defensively, that's who they emulate their game after. It's Brooks Robinson. Just the single greatest of all time. 16 Gold Gloves. He has the third highest defensive WAR all time with the 39.1. Again, not defensive WAR at third base, defensive WAR period at 39.1. Brooks made play after play after play, and not just in the regular season. He was great defensively in the biggest stage of all as well, the World Series. He was phenomenal. He was the mark, the bar, the barometer of third baseman, and he still is today. That's why, for me, the greatest defensive third baseman of all time, Brooks Robinson. Finally, we're going to head on out to the outfield. Now, with the outfield, I did it a little bit different. I didn't do left, center, right. I just did three outfielders that I considered the greatest three defensively of all time, in my opinion. I guess we could have broken it down from left, center, right, but it wasn't how I did it. Obviously, if you have an opinion on that and you want to break it down that way, please put it in the comments. I'd love to hear you tell me what your opinions are on that. But for me, I just went three outfield positions altogether. And first off, we're going to go with Willie Mays. Willie Mays, to me, is one of the greatest, if not probably the greatest defensive outfielder of all time. We're right there, and that's why he's on my list. He had 12 Gold Gloves. He made some of the greatest catches of all time. Of course, he had the big catch in the World Series over the shoulder. Just absolutely phenomenal. Willie Mays is one of the greatest players of all time, and he didn't lack defensively. He was just phenomenal. Great arm, great speed. He could cover a lot of ground in the outfield. Just was phenomenal, and it's Willie Mays. Another outfielder for me that makes this list has got to be Roberto Clemente. Again, probably the strongest arm out of everybody on this list. He had a rocket, a cannon of an arm in right field, and he was just phenomenal defensively. He had 12 Gold Gloves and could get to the ball, was just great range, so smart as well. And he, unfortunately, sadly, his career was cut short tragically. But for the time he played, he was absolutely a difference maker defensively in the field. And so Roberto Clemente makes a list for me. And then last but not least, and this is the one that I think a lot of people are going to have take umbrage with, but he makes the list for me because I saw him live. I saw him play a lot, and I think he was absolutely fantastic defensively. And that's Andrew Jones. I'm sorry, but I'm going to go with Andrew Jones. 10 Gold Glove awards in his career. His defensive WAR of 24.4 was 22nd all time. 22nd all time. Out of all positions, he was absolutely amazing. He could go get it. Again, he could cover so much ground, had a really good arm, played a great center field. He was just absolutely amazing, and it's backed up by his 10 Gold Gloves. And he was phenomenal defensively. He was a difference maker. So again, my outfield: Willie Mays, Andrew Jones, Roberto Clemente. That's my 3 in the outfield. So there you have it, folks. That is my all-time Major League Baseball defensive team. I'll run down the positions one more time. Pitcher, Greg Maddux. Catcher, Pudge Rodriguez. First base, Keith Hernandez. Second base, Roberto Alomar. Shortstop, Ozzie Smith. Third base, Brooks Robinson. Outfield, Willie Mays, Andrew Jones, Roberto Clemente. Now it's out to you guys. Let me know in the comments who makes your list. Maybe you have somebody different than me. I'd like to hear who makes your list. If you are again new here, please consider subscribing to the channel. Just hit that subscribe button and that bell notification. That way every time we go live or do a new video, you're notified. And if you could, a big help to me would be hit that like button. It helps the video, helps to get it out there, and we'd appreciate it. But guys, thanks for joining me. Thanks for taking the time. If you waited this long and went to the end, thank you for doing that. I definitely appreciate it. Until next time, keep rooting for the O's or your team, and take care of yourselves and each other.